along this way, then I decided I didn't need to be either a Republican or a Democrat. I didn't need to be a quote liberal or a conservative. I started to learn about the environment, about leftism. I learned more about classical conservatism. I learned a whole lot more about Christianity. I wrote that book on ideological possession because I realized, partly through my own experience, that it is a form of possession. That if you, once you divorce yourself from politics and ideology as an identity, a sort of reactive identity that you came to because of your own personal experiences, even if they're really severe, like losing your job or, being fired because you wanted to walk on the picket line, even if they're severe, if you mainly adopt your political ideology reactively, you don't you you don't have the independent stance you need to not be swallowed up by that ideology. Word of Life's message that Jesus is king and not your politics is really, really a good one, which is why some of the Word of Life people are on this call too. Like, this is why I was so attracted to that church. And I still absolutely agree with that. It is a form of possession. That might be a strong word, but if you look around the United States and you watch what's going on now and has been going on for, 10, 15 years now, why do people act the way they do? Why are they so angry at each other? Why do they treat each other like the great Satan because they don't agree with their political identity? And I'm using that term right now, identity. It's identity politics through the ideological lane. Um, they do it because that's who they worship. That's what they worship. It's come to fill a void and explain the things that can't otherwise be explained and give them a sense of belonging and identity. But you shouldn't get your identity and your belonging from your political ideology. The Morin Academy is heterodox, and that reflects my own heterodoxy and that of all the core members. We aren't willing to shut out possibilities, and we do put politics in perspective. Um, so, the lessons from my experience in my own life are lessons that I've tried to bring out in this book, The Gap in God's Country, and that we are trying to get out in the Morin Academy here. Our politics and our ideological identifications are often based on traumas that we've experienced, our negative and positive emotions, our fears, all of which are valid in the sense that we're feeling them and they're usually caused by real reasons. And yet they push us and they sort of feel like they're forcing us to take sides or to, find safe ground where we can join something so we can feel safe. But it's a false safety. Um, I would say it's clear to me, honestly, that most people, including myself, at least in the past, can adopt a political position without assessing not only every one of its arguments, but hardly any of its arguments at more than a superficial level. If we could assess all the arguments, we would absolutely find that we don't agree with some of them and that we agree with others. But most of us don't look carefully into the arguments. We we do operate on our emotions. And that's why we can switch ideological loyalties very quickly because most of our loyalties are based on what makes us feel good. And when something switches and it no longer makes us feel good, that's when we leave it and find something else that will make us feel good. But feelings, I mean, they're essential, okay? don't want to not have them, but they aren't a great basis for making political decisions as a citizen. When they get really inflamed, people can't even think at all. And thinking is essential for actually making good decisions. So you know you're in trouble when either you or somebody else says, I'm not even going to read that. I'm not going to listen to that. I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to, because that's a reaction that's based on fear. And it's fear that, oh, my, the where I feel like I belong and that makes me feel justified or safe or righteous or whatever it is that you want to feel is being threatened. And I just don't want to confront the idea that I might not have it. Okay. So I'll just make some suggestions, and then I mean the what I talk about for the rest of these sessions will hopefully help clarify and elaborate. Um, but I think we have to ask ourselves kind of probing questions. Uh, when we get confronted by an idea put forth by somebody on TV or somebody in our lives, and we get upset, so upset that we can't think about it and we can't, respond rationally to it. I think we need to ask ourselves, why am I so upset? Okay. Is it really the political proposals that's being put forth that's that upsetting? Or is it my personal experience that I'm reacting to again? It might be an experience that I had long ago, like being insulted by people on the East Coast who didn't like Thucydides, you know? But it's still and this is just a truism of our emotional lives. When you've had a traumatic experience in your earlier years, it's still alive in you forever. And when something else comes along that sort of feels the same way, it comes popping out all over again. And I think that's why people feel that emotion. It's it's not so much the political proposals, it's that hurt. Now, mine is a very, like specific situation. Most people probably have something actually more serious than that to fall back on when they're, feeling their feelings, like being fired or not knowing where their next meal is going to come from because there weren't any jobs, or, being mugged by somebody on the street, having their purse snatched, whatever it is, you know, all of us have had some really bad experiences. And we may have attached political significance to those experiences, especially if somebody came along and spoke to those experiences, right? And tried to explain them or offer safety from them. So ask yourself, why are you really upset? What's at the core of that? What really happened? And I know this sounds psychological, but that's because it is. Like, politics is extremely psychological. And so my book on ideological possession is political psychology. And this current book has also got a lot of political psychology in it. Ask yourself, why am I so attached to this ideological movement, if you are, or if you aren't, like people in your life who are, right? Like, why do I feel such strong feelings about this? Why am I so like feeling so much about it that I put like a F Joe Biden flag in my yard, or, put I don't know, a donkey bumper sticker on my car that says F you Trump. What, I don't know what, what people do. People do all kinds of things, right? Like, why is it that, why so much like energy attached to that, right? Why, when you're going into every single conversation, do you go into it as this, right? With your feelers up, right? What does that really represent? And then what can I do to directly address the way I feel? I suspect that a lot of people who are angry and expressing it through the ballot box today, and a lot of us were surprised at the vociferousness of the vote, right? Like how big of a vote that was in this last election. A lot of them have felt, rightly or wrongly, I'm not talking about like facts here, but just other than like our feelings, right? But they feel undervalued, they feel demeaned, they feel insulted, they feel attacked, and I argue in my book they feel precarious, and that's even if they're not poor. There's a growing sense of precarity throughout our population, and I try to explain how that could be, right? But a growing number of people have cause to believe that their livelihoods are not secure, even if they have one, or they have to work, several jobs because their livelihoods definitely are not secure. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of anxiety out there. There's a lot of fear. And then on top of that, there's this cultural feeling that cultural elites look down upon ordinary people, and that they don't share very much in common, that they live very different lives. And I would have to say, I think that's true. I think that's true. I've witnessed that myself quite a bit. And so people don't like that, and it hurts their feelings. Now, at this point in time, I'm honest with you, I think we're past the point where we can have these questions asked and answered in a rational manner. I think my book probably came out a little too late for this. And probably no book would ever like cause people to reconsider. I'm doing the best I can, but I don't believe that, because I mean, there have been other books like my book. I don't think there's a book that's covered as much ground from different, areas, and sources of information as this book. But What's the Matter with Kansas came out years ago, and it kind of sent the same message about like listening to other people. And it did the Democratic Party didn't hear that message. um, but anyway, like, these are the questions I think we need to ask ourselves. How can I more dispassionately evaluate my limited political economic choices? We have to realize that no political ideology or political proposal is gonna solve all of our problems. It never will. We need to realize that it's politics is imperfect because human beings are imperfect. So we have to ask, given the limited power that we have, which as a single voter is pretty small, but even as a member of a group is only so much, what can I do? What's responsible to do, knowing that perfection is never achievable? And we have to ask of others who come at us with anger or who are annoying because they come at us, like, I don't know how many times I've met somebody first time out of the gate, never saw them before, and the first things out of their mouths is political, which is just bizarre. It's like, really, like ideological possession has taken over when it's not, hello, I'm so and so. I do this for a living. My family comes from here. No, it's like immediate political dissertation in your face. That's weird. Okay. So when you meet somebody that strikes you as overwrought, about politics, I think it's important, at least at first, the right thing to do is to not say, what's wrong with you, but what's wrong? If you had a neighbor or a friend or a member of your family who had behaved fairly normally for most of the time you'd known them, then suddenly they came in and they were all pissed off and they snapped at you, or they insulted you, or they said some weird thing about what needed to be done. If you like them enough, you would probably say, is something wrong? Like, have I done something wrong? Has something gone wrong in your life? Do we need to talk about this? Like, what can I do to, help untangle this? Now, if the person keeps coming after a while, nobody could accuse you of, like you do have to kind of defend yourself at a certain point. But you see what I'm saying? Like the loving, charitable response, if you care, is what's wrong? you know? And then can we do something about that? If, on the other hand, you are defensive immediately right back, then you have become part of the problem, right? So you are now responding in the same sort of way. And defensiveness can amount to a sort of gaslighting. This is a little picture from the movie there. If you don't know the reference, watch the movie. I think it's called Gaslight. But anyway, like you can look it up. I watched it a while ago. You know, you're doing that by basically confirming to them. You're sort of mirroring back their angst and their anger and you're confirming, but you're also basically dismissing their feelings and more or less treating them as though they're crazy. And that's what gaslighting is. It's to say, no, you didn't see what you saw. No, you didn't hear what I didn't say that. I didn't do that. This isn't true at all. Okay. And when you do that, you have just pulled the rug out from under the other person's unfortunate reality, right? Who has become like so overwrought with politics. This is their reality, right? In the case of politics. Um, and so you're not going to get anywhere with that. And now you're upset too. So as much as with it would, as much as what's in our power to do, I I think we need to try to first react with charity and ask ourselves, how can I more dispassionately address the other person's politics as their emotional reactions? Because if you see their politics as an emotional reaction, you then should be able to say, why are you having this emotional reaction? And you might be surprised that if you ask a few questions, they start to say things that you can empathize with and that you can try to find some common ground with. And at least you will have shown them that you care rather than confirming their deepest suspicions that you are somehow batting for the evil team. Okay. I've tried this. It can work. I mean, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the person, right? Like some people are just so like zealous and so completely swallowed up by their ideology, they will not listen to you at all. Um, but many of them will if you kind of destabilize them by actually being kind. Again, I'm not sure this is going to be too fruitful moving forward, but maybe I'm just having a bad day. Um, so we know this about our relationships deep down. Healthy human relationships involve a tremendous amount of communication, and it has to be honest and kind. And without that, people insert their own narratives, right, to explain other people's behavior. So the only way to not have a false narrative created about you, about the type of person you are, or your particular political choice, the only choice is to communicate. And we have to have a predisposition to value and support the other person in a good, healthy relationship. And the same thing goes in politics. We have to be willing to work to address the root causes of a person's hurt feelings in a friendship. And we've got to be able to do the same thing in politics if we're going to have politics. Because politics actually implies, it's actually defined by give and take, and deliberations and compromises. What we're doing right now, largely in the United States, is not politics, it's ideological warfare. They're two very different things. Healthy politics involve realistic expectations of what politics can even do. If you lower your expectations and you don't think that your political ideology is going to bring heaven down to earth, then you're not going to attach quite so much emotion in it. You're not going to think that, life is going to come to an end if your side doesn't win, and you're more likely to be able to negotiate. We need to re identify the perfect with God. I think it's very true what Carl Jung said, that ideology is a perverse form of religion, and the cure for it is understanding that we are not gods and we can't do perfect things in the world. And there is a God who is transcendent and who is perfect. So we don't have to be. We need to be predisposed to see others as community members and citizens in political friendship. And we have to have a realistic expectation that conflict will always be a part of that relationship. Friends who are actual friends don't always get along. They hear each other and they compromise and come to conclusions. Harmony only happens if people aren't paying attention to each other and don't care very much about each other. And the same thing goes for politics. We need to figure out what causes people actual harm and try to deliberate about fixing those problems, because ultimately, the root causes of harm and pain are what have caused so much stress and tension and anger in our society. And we need to work towards a context in which people can flourish so that those harms don't happen in the future. We've been in the mode of patching things up for decades, if not forever, but we need to also talk about how we can create a context in which people can be good. So